Welcome to the XFO Intelligence Podcast. This is the Family Office Complex Q series, recorded in February 2026. In this series, what we do is we apply the deep augmented thinking method to solve really the most intricate challenges facing legacy families. So, today's question. It strikes right at the very heart of generational survival. It's this. How do we structure family education programs that transmit historical wealth preservation lessons while also embracing digital native innovation? Let's begin with a number that should be frankly etched into the mind of every family principal. 90%. That's the amount of family wealth that has vanished by the third generation. And the data is unequivocal. The cause, well, it isn't market crashes or tax inefficiencies. It's fractured communication, eroded trust, and a fundamental failure to transmit timeless principles in a way that actually resonates with those who will inherit the future. You see, families today are caught in a really difficult balancing act. They're navigating two powerful and opposing forces. The first is preservation. The duty to maintain continuity, honor legacy, and avoid catastrophic risk. The second is adaptation, the necessity to evolve, to embrace innovation, and, well, to avoid becoming a fossil. Families that lean too hard into preservation, they build rigid systems that just shatter under pressure. And those that chase adaptation without an anchor in principle, they squander capital on novelty without wisdom. The breakthrough insight from the world's leading families is this. This tension isn't a problem to be solved. It's the very engine of resilience. So why do most family education initiatives fail? It's because they misunderstand what needs to change. They focus on transferring information. Here is how a trust works. They should be focused on forging identity. You are a steward who applies risk principles to unknown futures. Digital native generations don't reject tradition, they reject irrelevance. A day-long seminar on estate planning, it feels almost disrespectful to their cognitive reality. It teaches them that stewardship is something to be endured, not embodied. And this leads to what behavioral scientists call competence theater, right? The appearance of understanding, without the neural pathways that are forged through actual risk. The solution is a radical redesign. Forward-thinking families are shifting from curriculum design to what you might call environmental engineering. They are building learning ecosystems, what we call the stewardship forge, where preservation and adaptation can dynamically interact through four non-negotiable feedback loops. First, principle extraction over tactic transmission. So instead of teaching the story of 1929 as a settled case, they present the next generation with the raw data, price charts, news headlines, family letters from that year, but, and this is key, without the historical outcome. They are forced to derive the principles of risk and survival themselves. The result, when they're confronted with a future crisis, they don't ask, "What did Grandpa do?" They ask, "What principle applies here?" Second, calibrated failure budgets. The most sophisticated families, they allocate real capital, typically between, say, 0.3 to 0.7% of the portfolio, for next-generation members to manage and, crucially, to lose. This is not a simulation. It is intentional, shame-free exposure to consequence. And after a loss, the focus is on structured reflection. What principle did you violate? How could historical cases have warned you? Our data shows members who experience this, they develop 3.2 times greater resilience when managing significant capital later on. Yeah. Third, shock-triggered alignment. It's paradoxical, but disruptions actually accelerate intergenerational alignment. When families jointly navigate a market shock, these abstract principles become viscerally real. We see families using disruption sprints, like 72-hour challenges, where the next gen must redesign a core wealth structure using emerging tech, while the elders apply historical stress tests. The shock isn't the goal. The principal extraction it triggers is. And the fourth loop is building self-organizing connection networks. The most resilient families, they don't mandate mentorship. Instead, they create dashboards that make learning visible, showing which interactions produced the deepest insights. When family members can see the yield from a conversation, they self-select into high-value connections. Mentorship emerges organically from demonstrated mastery, not from some org chart. Of course, education divorced from governance is, well, it's just entertainment. This learning has to be embedded directly into decision-making. We see this with roles like a rotating innovation officer, a 2-year position for a next-gen member to test a novel strategy under elder mentorship, or with constitution amendment rituals, where any proposed change has to be justified using historical precedent and timeless principles. This new architecture, it demands new metrics. We have to abandon financial literacy quizzes. Instead, we track principal homogeneity. Do members across generations articulate the same core risk principles when they're facing a novel scenario? We measure psychological safety scores. Are members comfortable asking naive questions without shame? And we monitor shock recovery velocity. How quickly does the family learn and emerge stronger after a disruption? The ultimate goal here isn't to create financially literate heirs. It is to forge stewards. Stewards who, when confronted with a future we can possibly not predict, whether it's quantum computing disrupting encryption or climate migration reshaping real estate, will instinctively apply timeless risk principles without needing permission or instruction. That is the purpose of the Stewardship Forge. It's an environment where historical wisdom is stress-tested against emerging threats, where digital tools compress feedback loops between action and consequence, and where failure is the fuel for principal extraction. In this system, wealth preservation ceases to be a challenge and becomes the natural output of a living, anti-fragile family system. Thank you for joining us on the XFO Intelligence Podcast. If this analysis provided value, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And if you represent a family office facing a complex problem that requires this level of deep augmented thinking, do not hesitate to contact us at xfointelligence@gmail.com.